to gauge the probability of a government shutdown at the end of April, are your directions to the Capitol Hill to hold firm on the spending cuts that the president wants, or to try to wheel and deal and get a bill that can keep the government open?
I don't know that they're mutually exclusive. I think we want
pushback on Capitol Hill from some of the
well,
spending
there
cuts.
genuinely is, but I think that we want both. I think we want to maintain some of the spending priorities as well as some of the reductions in the 2017 budget. We want to do so responsibly and do so within the priorities that the president's laid out. I think his funding requests and priorities are laid out in the budget that Director Mulvaney detailed and sent up for the remainder of 2017. There's some key things in that, and I think that that it is going to begin a conversation that we will continue to have with the House and Senate. But I don't think both of those goals are mutually exclusive. Obviously, we don't want the government to shut down, but we want to make sure that we're funding the priorities of the government.
You seem to be picking a fight with the Freedom Caucus, and the Freedom Caucus, as you know, has 30 members. Does the president realize how important this caucus is, this coalition is, in terms of passing a replacement bill for the Affordable Care Act and passing the rest of his legislative agenda?
Well, of course he understands that the goal of all legislation is get to a majority in the House, majority in the Senate, and so, but at the end of the day, he recognizes that he has a bold and robust agenda that he is trying to enact, that he ran on and told the American people that he would do when he was president, and he's going to get the votes from wherever he can.
Was the president trying to bully the Freedom Caucus?
No, I think this is consistent with everything that he has said since Friday of last week. And I think that he is looking for members on both sides of the aisle who want to be constructive to achieve the goal of a patient-centric healthcare system. That's it, plain and simple, and I think that his comments and his tweets speak for themselves with respect to how he feels and why. John?
Following on that, is this a divide and conquer strategy?
No, it's a math strategy, which is to get to 216 and pass an effort and continue to move the agenda
First,
forward.
President Trump is pushing for a major tax cut, increases in defense and infrastructure spending, and the border wall. Does he think this agenda has to be deficit neutral, or is he open to plans that might initially add to the debt?
Well, I think when it comes to tax reform, he's got three underlying goals. One is tax simplification, two is to lower the rates, and three is to grow jobs in the economy. And I think part of it is that if you look at it dynamically, as the plan develops, and again, as I mentioned earlier, we're not there yet. We are beginning that process of engaging with stakeholders. As the plan develops and there's a cost put on it, that's going to be a decision that gets looked at, as well as what are the economic growth and job creation aspects to it. So to answer that question without knowing what the full scope of it is looking at something and answering it in a vacuum.
Tax reform the number one priority for this administration at this point, or is healthcare still kind of taking up some of the oxygen?
Well, I don't know that it's taking up oxygen. I think there's plenty of oxygen for both to go on. I think the president would still like to see it done. But I think there's no reason that we can't. I mean, if you look at the timeline for tax reform, you're talking several months. And so I think that the process is beginning on that, and I think you can have a dual-track strategy. It's not an either-or proposition.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah.
The Wall Street Journal reported this morning that the Trump administration is proposing more modest changes to NAFTA. Like, for example, they're leaving the arbitration panel that deals with trade disputes in place, et cetera, et cetera. Is the White House backing away from some of the more sweeping changes to NAFTA that the president proposed during the campaign?
You know, I would just argue that Robert Lighthizer isn't even nominated yet. That is not a statement of administration policy at this point. There is nothing that in those documents that we are confirming, or in that report rather, that we are confirming. That is not a statement of administration policy. That is not an accurate assessment of where we are at this time. And I think our goal is to get Robert Lighthizer appointed as the next ambassador and U.S. trade representative. And then when we have that, we will have plenty of updates on where we go with respect to NAFTA and the rest of our trade agreements. Same way that you protect sources. When I call you and say you've got 18 anonymous sources and you go, well, I can't reveal my sources, Chairman Nunes, in conducting an investigation and a review, has an opportunity to have his sources. Our view was that the smart move was to make all the materials available to the chairman and the ranking member of the relevant committees. And I understand the obsession with the process piece, but we are focused on the substance of it, and I think the goal is to make sure that people have the substance that are looking into this, that we have asked to look into this, and go.
Two White House officials, according to New York Times reporting, provided Representative Nunes with the information that he spoke about last week. And according to the Times, the senior director for intelligence on the NSC, who was hired by Michael Flynn, started going through these documents after the president's tweet, the wiretapping tweet. So I'm wondering if the White House thinks it's appropriate for national security officials to be conducting what's basically a political task, which is trying to find information that then validates something the president said.
Yeah. So I've read the report, and respectfully, I think your question assumes that the reporting is correct. And so I would just suggest to you that the letter that was submitted earlier to the chairman and the ranking members of the two intelligence committees on the Hill, the reason that the White House has asked them to come up is to view that information. And again, I don't want to get in front of that. As I've said before, we are not as obsessed with the process as much as the substance, and I think that our goal is to make sure that the ranking members of both committees, as well as the chairman, see the information, the materials that are important to this, and then worry about the outcome at the end.
Yesterday that you said that when you were asked who cleared in Chairman Nunes, that you had asked some preliminary questions, had not gotten answers, and that you would continue to ask.
Yeah.
So my question today is, you know the answers to that, and you are saying you will not answer that question today, or you
that's
don't
not
know?
right. No, so what I'm saying to you is that the decision that has been made is to bring in all of the relevant individuals that are reviewing the situation and make them available, that getting into sources and process is not the proper way to conduct this review, and we want the people who are conducting it to understand more fully the materials, not necessarily who came in what time. And
that in the ordinary course of business, the national security staff discovered documents. Can you explain how these documents were uncovered? What does it mean?
Yeah, I don't think, no, I'm not. That's why we've invited them up for into a classified setting, is for them to see these materials and understand it. This is not the setting that is appropriate to discuss that.
So who in the national security staff then uncovered the document?
Good question. That is not, again, as I've mentioned multiple times, we're not here to go through the process. Our job is to get to the substance of this and to make sure that the people who have the appropriate access and authority to look into this matter and then take appropriate steps. Obama's Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense that is out there, Evelyn Farkas, she made it clear that it was their goal to spread this information around, that they went around and did this, and she said, quote, that's why there's so many leaks.
Get as much intelligence as you can before President Obama leaves the administration, because I had a fear that somehow that information would disappear with the senior people who left, if they found out how we knew what we knew. So I became very worried because not enough was coming out into the open, and I knew that there was more. So then I had talked to some of my former colleagues, and I knew that they were trying to also help get information to the Hill. That's why you have the leaking.
There are serious questions out there about what happened and why and who did it. And I think that's really where our focus is, in making sure that that information gets out.
Okay, and lastly, Sean, do you know who allowed you to visit?
No.
So what is the goal for the White House to accomplish during the visit?
Well, I think there's a few things. One is, I think this is an opportunity for President Trump to develop a relationship in person with President Xi. He's spoken to him on the phone a few times. But we have big problems, and I mean, everything from the South China Sea to trade, to North Korea. There are big issues of national and economic security that need to get addressed. And I think there's going to be a lot on the table when it comes to that over the 2 days that they will talk.
Gave a interview a few days ago to Forbes magazine in which he said that he would update his father regularly, perhaps quarterly, on the business, including giving profitability reports. So I have two questions about that. One is, have they spoken about the business since January? And two, how does this not violate what the president set out as the protocols for how he would deal with the business?
Well, two things. I don't know if they've spoken. It's not, that's maybe a question better directed to the Trump organization. But secondly, I think everything that he's done is in accordance with what the counsel's office and the ethics folks.
And on the subject of partisanship and obstructionism, whose responsibility does the president feel it is to put an end to partisanship, and who needs to be reaching out to whom collectively?
I think it's a two-way street. When you look at this fight on Gorsuch, it's one thing to vote no. It's one thing to say that we don't agree, but to now turn to filibustering or threatening to filibuster Senate unbelievably qualified people, and there's nobody that I'm aware of, even on the left, that is suggesting that Judge Gorsuch isn't qualified to serve as a Supreme Court justice. You go back through President Obama, President Clinton, Republicans have joined with Democrats to allow people who are qualified to go onto the court. And to see this new precedent be formed by Leader Schumer is disappointing, because this is a huge, huge crack. I think there was a column in one of the papers today. I think you are really fundamentally changing how the Senate's going to operate by doing this. And there's no sense of them wanting to work with this president. So at some point, I think we have shown a willingness to bring them together. It's amazing how many senators, when you talk to them over the course of the last, almost 70 days, have said, I've been to the White House more in the last 70 days of a Trump administration than I was during 8 years of an Obama administration. And I think that speaks to the president's desire to bring people together and to find common ground on areas of mutual agreement where we can move the country forward. Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow.